Well, hello, everybody. Good evening, and welcome to our Tuesday story time. Uh, Forgot to turn off my in studio monitors here. So, tonight we are starting with a new story time. We are starting into Gifted by D.W. Lewis. You know Gifted by D.W. Lewis, right? You guys have all read it. You picked it up on Amazon. You read it on Kindle Unlimited. You supported this indie author. No? Well, I'm here to bring it to you. So, on our Saturday stream, we read The Mystery Man, available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius, for your reviewing pleasure whenever you are so ready to go and listen to it. Up there, you will also find The Edge of Control. You will find Murder at Maplewood Manor. You'll find the Apprentice Adept series by Piers Anthony. You'll find a couple of Xanth books. You'll find The Winter of the World. Can't remember off the top of my head who reads that one or wrote that one. I read it. He wrote it. So, quite a bit out there for you to go and listen in on when and if you are ready to do so. But until then, glad to have you here with me. I hope you are ready to dive in. So, Gifted by D.W. Lewis, a debut novel by this indie author. It is, again, available on Amazon. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Make sure you spell it right. Every time I try to search on Amazon for this, it corrects the spelling because it doesn't like the Y. Why? Who knows? So tonight we'll go ahead and dive on in. We'll see how many chapters that we get through. I will be, of course, recording these. They will be available on the YouTube channel a little bit later tonight. So if you haven't done so, stop on up and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that way you can get into it as well when you are ready to do so. And if you're here with me, hey, I'm glad to have you here with me. So sit back, everybody, relax, and prepare to enjoy as we dive into what have I done? As we dive into another night of story time here together. As we start into this debut novel by D.W. Lewis. And I haven't mentioned it, but please feel free to chat with each other, interact, say hello. The YouTube channel is the best place to do so, but hey, I'm on X, I'm on Kick, I'm on Twitch, I'm on YouTube, all over the place. And I'll be happy to, as long as I see the questions or comments, chat with you in between chapters. Here we go. Prologue. Ow! Stop fidgeting. It hurts. Cal squirmed, trying his best to protect the small cut just above his eye. He couldn't tell what he felt more annoyed about: the sting each time the ointment-soaked rag dabbed against his forehead, the idea that Leif had to take care of him again, or the fact that Leif was seeing him be a big baby about such a tiny cut. Cal was supposed to be a grown-up by now, and grown-ups never showed pain. The rag in Leif's hand reeked of Lady Havisham's herbs. It tickled Cal's nose and made his eyes water each time it came close. "It's your own fault for fighting in the first place," Leif huffed. "No, it's not. Stupid Jord and his stupid friends were making fun of us again. He said we lived in the orphanage because no one wants us," Cal replied, finally able to push Leif's hand away from his forehead. Leif leaned back in his chair, the worn wood creaking under his weight. Leif wasn't a fat man. It was just that the furniture in the orphanage was so old. Guessing which was older, Leif or the orphanage, was a favorite pastime of Cal and Ovette. The orphanage had leaks, broken floors, and smelly holes, and it was always either too hot or too cold. But Leif had wrinkles around his eyes and spiky gray stubble that poked and pricked with every hug. Maybe Leif and the orphanage were the same age. The orphanage stood in the center of a large open area with streets and alleyways jutting off in all directions. Tall and awkward, it looked like a mishmash of oddly shaped buildings smushed and stacked on top of one another, uneven cubes squashed together to form 3 floors. Its presence dominated the area, looking more like a ramshackle clay castle than a home for orphans, misfits, and the odd runaway. Even the color was distinct from the other buildings around it. Streaks of white shot through the muted red clay, as if made by giant paintbrushes, the result of many hasty repairs over the years. Not every problem needs to be punched, Cal, Leaf said, giving Cal his "you're getting a lecture" look. It wasn't my fault. I didn't start it. Cal scrunched up his face. Taking the blame again was out of the question. He'd sit there until he was blue in the face if he had to. Stupid Jord and his stupid friends. Much to Cal's relief, Leif set down the blood-speckled rag and tore away a smaller strip of cloth, placing it over Cal's cut. Fighting is rarely the answer. Violence will only ever lead to more violence. I didn't start it. Cal hated Leif's lectures. They always made it feel like things were his fault. Why didn't Leif ever take his side? I don't want to argue with you, Cal. Leif sighed. Have you seen Ovette? It's getting late. She's upstairs on your balcony, staring at the chain again. She has a headache again. Does she now? Leif always rubbed his stubble with a far-off look in his eye whenever Cal mentioned Ovette's headaches. It was a good thing, Cal thought. It showed he cared about them. Well, cared about Ovette, at least. That was enough for Cal. Leif, can I ask you something? Of course, Cal. You can ask me anything. Are we different? Me, Ovette, and the others? Letting what that idiot Jord had said get to him was dumb, but maybe Jord was right. Cal didn't know which would be worse, that Jord was right about Cal and the other orphans being different, or just Jord being right. What do you mean, different? We don't have parents. We don't have a real home. We don't have a real family, Cal mumbled. Dropping his head, he tried to will away the tears that were already forming. He was happy Ovette wasn't here to see him getting so upset. Cal didn't allow himself to cry often. Big boys didn't cry. Still, it was hard not to sometimes. Cal, listen to me. Leif sat on the bed next to Cal, putting his arm around him. You don't need to be related by blood to be someone's family. Family bonds run far deeper than that. They do? Cal sniffed. Of course. Answer me this. Do you love everyone here? Cal dipped his head again. His cheeks flushed. Maybe. And do they love you? I think so. Then that's all you need. As long as you have people that you love and love you back, you have a family. Cal thought about what Leif had said for a moment. Is Lady Havisham part of my family? Of course. Why wouldn't she be? Cal scrunched up his face again, crossing his arms. Juvenile indignation suited him much better than soppy feelings like love. Easier for him to process. She's mean. She's always accusing me of stealing or fighting or not doing my chores. Leif folded his arms in response, a knowing smile playing across his face. I do my chores every day. Even do Ovette's when she's not feeling or when she's feeling sick, Cal blurted out. Oh, do you? Do you steal and fight as well? Cal looked away from Leif, annoyed that he'd walked into his trap. Not every day. Leif chuckled. It was a warm, chesty chuckle, neither forgiving nor accusing. Just an old man finding the antics of youth amusing. Leif was old. There was no denying that. Maybe Cal would never find out how old he actually was, or even if he was older than the orphanage they all lived in. But no matter what, Cal loved Leif. And if what he said was true, that made Leif family. Come on, it's getting late. Leif gave Cal a pat on the back and stood, making his way toward the door. Cal pushed himself up from the bed, scurrying after Leif. Do we get a story? Cal asked. If there was one thing he looked forward to, it was Leif's stories. Brave heroes fighting armies, clever rogues dodging the Daven prefects, or a powerful giftling making her last stand against an army of inquisitors. Leif chuckled again. Do you promise no more stealing and fighting? I promise. Leif didn't reply, but raised an eyebrow and tilted his head forward. I promise I'll try? It wasn't as strong an answer, but one that was closer to the truth. Go and tell Oved it's time for bed, and I'll get a story ready. Yes! Cal pushed his way past Leif, taking the stairs to Leif's bedroom two at a time. The inside of the orphanage was just as mismatched as its exterior, its walls jutting out at weird angles. Dusty, clay-trodden rugs were spread across the floor, objects that defied Lady Havisham's unending need for cleanliness. Every inch of free space was occupied by either a chest of drawers topped with whatever trinkets the younger kids could find, or a bookshelf crammed with worn books, their cheap covers fraying at the edges. Leif always went on about the importance of good reading and being as learned as possible. Just the thought of sitting down with an old, dusty tome made Cal's eyes roll. His hands itched to be used, to make, to mend, to steal. Leif did his best to make sure Cal and the others were all good members of the community, having each of them do odd jobs for anyone who needed help. But the orphanage was the perfect training ground for any would-be thief. Plenty of cubbyholes to hide away in. To Cal, this chaos was home. It was the only real one he'd ever known. Cal found Ovette in her usual spot, sitting out on the balcony in Leif's bedroom. It offered the perfect view of both the volcano and the city of Igni, which was built up around it. A gigantic chain speared the mouth of the volcano, its links casting the whole city in shadow. The chain ran for miles and miles, stretching as far as Cal could see, eventually arching up and punching through the cloud layer, connected by some unseeable tether to the great spire that sat in the middle of the known world. Sanctum Spire, Leif had called it. Stepping out onto the balcony, Cal couldn't help but look up at the giant chain. He stared at the runes and symbols that lined each link's outer layer, every one of them glowing warm with the gift. Airships spewing trails of smoke and most likely belonging to the Daven military or some rich folk traveled close to the chain. What would it be like to be so close to something so massive? Could the people aboard those airships read the writing on the chains? Were the symbols hot or cold? Did people ever try to touch the chain? The sight of it was awe-inspiring and chilling all at once. It had a way of making Cal feel small and insignificant. He'd asked Leif time and time again what the chains were and what their purpose was, but Leif never gave him a straight answer. Either he didn't think Cal was old enough, or he just didn't know. Ovette sat with one of her hands pressed against her temple, wincing, her skin gleaming with sweat. Ever since Cal had first met her, Ovette had suffered from headaches. They didn't happen that often, but whenever they did, Ovette would only ever want to stare up at the chain. She said looking at it made her feel better, as if the chain reminded her that her problems were small and that there were things much bigger than her. But of course, things were bigger than her. She was the same age as Cal. Most things were bigger than her. Cal? Ovette said, not turning her head away from the chain above. What? Can you sit with me for a bit? Leif said we have to go back inside. It's nearly story time. Please? Just for a bit? Fine. The moment Cal sat next to her, Ovette buried her face in his shoulder, rubbing her forehead against his dirty tunic. Cal always felt helpless whenever Ovette had one of her headaches. He wanted nothing more than to be able to take them away from her. But what could he do? If it was Jord or one of the other kids making fun of them, that was a problem he could deal with, a problem he enjoyed dealing with. But a headache? How was he supposed to fight a headache? Want me to call Lady Havisham? Cal asked. No. Ovette winced again. Her body trembled against Cal's small frame. What story do you think Leif will tell us this time? Cal asked. I hope it's one about heroes and monsters again. Pride swelled in his chest at the thought of standing in defiance against an impossibly large army. And then him, bloody and victorious, while his foes lay fallen at his feet. He breathed in this make-believe victory, and for a moment, the thick swell of ash and dust from the nearby smelt mines almost smelled like the fires of glorious battle. I don't like those, Ovette mumbled. They're scary. What? Why? They're just stories. Besides, if any monsters come, I'll fight them for you. Ovette looked up at Cal, locking eyes with him. His cheeks flushed red, his skin growing warm. Promise? Of course, Cal replied, halfway between courageous and embarrassed. When I get my gift, I'll keep everyone at the orphanage safe. You'll see. Ovette pushed herself off Cal, wiping her forehead with the sleeve of her shirt. Even clothed in rags, dirty and sweat-stained, Ovette was the purest thing Cal had ever seen. She was embarrassed by her stark white hair, saying it was just one more thing that made her different from everyone else, especially compared to Cal's jet black mop, but Cal liked it. He would tell her she was lucky because most people had to try really hard to be noticed, like when vendors were giving out free food in the markets, or if a traveling merchant had special things to offer. Cal always got ignored because he looked just like every other orphan, dirty and desperate. Sounds of a scuffle in the streets below drew Cal's attention. Not an uncommon sound in the Embers district, but it was one that made Ovette flinch nonetheless. The Davins sometimes sent a patrol of prefects into the Embers, looking for something. Cal wasn't sure what, but whenever they did come around, Leif always made sure Cal and Ovette were hidden. Maybe they just didn't like children. Or maybe they didn't like Leif. Or Lady Havisham. Cal! Ovette! It's time for bed, Leif called from inside. Coming, Ovette called back before turning to Cal. Come on, let's not keep Leif waiting. Yeah, I want to ask for a. Oh, I almost forgot, Cal cried, digging through his pockets. Forgot what? Cal pulled out a small patchwork coin pouch. His chest swelled again as he held out the several pieces of fabric haphazardly stitched together and tied to the top with a fraying piece of string. Your naming day present, Cal beamed, unable to stop the enormous grin spreading across his face. Ovette looked at him with a confusion that slowly shifted into sadness. Cal? I don't know when my naming day is. None of us do. I know, but that means it must have happened at some point, right? Cal shoved the coin pouch into Ovette's hands. Who's to say it wasn't today? Ovette smiled as she ran her thumb over the rough exterior, taking in all the lumps and bumps of the mismatched fabrics. Thank you, Cal. There's just one final piece left, Cal said. Open it. Ovette did as she was asked, pulling the fabric apart to create an opening at the top. Cal reached into his pocket once more and took out a single coin, scratched and dirty. He plopped it into the coin pouch, his beaming smile even more triumphant. Where did you get that? Ovette asked, her eyes wide as she stared down at the coin. I stole. Uh, Found it on the floor, Cal replied. Had a real hard time hiding it from Lady Havisham as well. Ovette stared at Cal for a moment before throwing her arms around him and drawing him in for a hug. When she finally pushed herself off him, Cal could see that the color had returned to her face somewhat, her previous headache she'd been suffering from already forgotten. Now all that remained was a toothy smile, a smile that spread warmth inside him. Her coin pouch clutched in her hands, Ovette skipped past Cal, turning back as she neared the balcony door. If it's really my naming day, then I'm going to ask Leif to tell a princess story, Ovette said with a grin, and then bounded inside. No! I hate princess stories, Cal moaned, rushing after Ovette. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the prologue. What do you think so far? Are you enjoying it? Is it here for you? Is this the kind of story you like to hear? I hope so. Hopefully, you are enjoying it, as I am. And now we'll go ahead and move on to our next wonderful chapter. If you guys have any questions, any comments, anything else, please feel free to throw them into the chats. Again, YouTube is the easiest and best place for that, but whichever channel you happen to be on, I will try to catch them if I can. And now it is time for 1. Cal. There was something comforting about the ring of his hammer on metal, a focus that Cal could only find once he set his mind to working and shaping. The work was grueling, hot, and Huel constantly tried to cheat him when it came to pay, but he enjoyed being in the forge. He enjoyed the simple structure it offered him. Plus, as Leif and Ovette kept saying, it kept him out of trouble. Hollowborn! Oi, Hollowborn! Are you done with those blades yet? A gruff voice called from inside. If you're slacking off back there, I'll drag your hind over to the prefects myself. Don't you think I won't? I'm sticking my neck out for you and those hollowlings at the dirty orphanage. Yes, I sharpened them yesterday, Cal shouted back. Huel, the blacksmith. He was a bulbous whale of a man, an ale-soaked asshole that loved to remind Cal of two things. First and foremost, that Cal was lucky to be employed, and it was only by Huel's good graces that he was able to scrape enough together to eat every day. And second, that Cal was a Hollowborn. Hollowborn. It was a Davan name for his kind, one of the unfortunate few for whom their gift never manifested. If what Leif had taught Cal was true, since his 16th birthday had come and gone 2 years ago, it was now too late for him. Other people, nearly every other person, had the ability to channel the gift. Most could only manifest it to aid with mundane tasks, but there were a few who could wield the gift to destructive ends. Those who joined the prefects, for example. Try as he might, Cal had no connection to the gift. He couldn't sense it around him, and no gift placed Cal and the others like him at the bottom rung of society. Everyone else would much rather pretend they didn't exist. Dave and propaganda didn't help either. But old, pissed, stinking, pot-bellied Huel loved to tell Cal how lucky he was, how generous it was of him to hire a Hollowborn. Generous? More like cheap labor, Cal always told himself. Huel could get away with paying Cal whatever he liked for his work. No real employment meant no real pay, which meant Cal had to be smart about the work he did. Play the game, Leif would often say. Not something Cal relished. He preferred simpler ways of dealing with his problems. Huel lumbered into the forge, swiping the back of his arm across his sweaty forehead. A small pipe, filled with whatever dried herbs Huel could get his hands on, jutted out from his mouth. With the click of his finger, he lit the pipe, as if it were nothing. His grubby hands pawed at Cal's hard work as he started gathering up the sharpened swords. The clink and clang of the swords scraping against one another and Huel's billow of stinking smoke on the leather handles made Cal's blood boil. Huel didn't care for the effort Cal had put into each blade, didn't give a thought to the meticulous care Cal had poured into the oiling of the metal, the wrapping of the handles. No, all Huel cared about was getting money for work he hadn't done and then spending that money on whatever suited his fancy. Ale, women, ale-drenched women, whatever. Cal bit his tongue and continued hammering the cooling blade he had on the anvil. The pounding of the hammer was considerably louder this time around. Prefect Client'll be here soon. Got a bunch of new recruits who need cheap blades. Make sure you stay out of the sight. You know what'll happen to you if they find you're a hollow, Huel slurred. They wouldn't know, Cal snorted. Not unless you told them. Oh, they know all right, boy. They're trained to hunt riffraff like you. Cal hated it, but Huel was right. Prefects were the city's guard. You didn't like Cal and Huel. They had decided they hated their own kind and preferred to lick the hand of the Daven overlords. They were trained by the Davens to enforce their form of justice. Stick within the bounds of Daven law, and you're fine. But step 1 foot outside of it, and the prefect would be more than happy to help you disappear. That was doubly worse for Cal and the other Hollowborn. Igni and her people had no love for the Hollowborn, and the prefects would lock Cal up just for being one. Cal had heard that the other chained cities treated their Hollowborn better. Not that that helped him in any way. Huel eyed the length of a sword, ran his finger along the edge of its blade, his stupid, fat eyes bulging out of their sockets as he judged the keenness. That'll do, Huel gruffed, tossing the sword amongst the others with little care. My pay? Cal said between hammer strikes. You'll get paid when I get paid, boy, and not a moment sooner, Huel replied. You still haven't paid for the last batch I forged, Cal said, stopping his work and glaring at Huel. This song and dance again. Again. And what makes you think I should? Those blades were uneven and about as straight as a dog's hind leg. You should thank your luck that I kept you on after that mess, Huel spat. Cal set down his hammer and took off his leather apron, slowly and calmly. He stood and walked over to Huel, standing so close to the oath that he could smell the day-old, or week-old, ale on his breath. What do you think the prefects would say if they found out a Hollowborn was the one who made their weapons? How I tainted the steel with my touch. Huh? Cal said, forcing his voice to remain level. Who do you think would be in more trouble, Huel? Me? Some street rat that no one cares about? Or you, a dodgy bottom feeder of a blacksmith who takes advantage of anyone he can. Huel's face twisted, his tiny brain not sure if it was supposed to be shocked, angry, or scared of what Cal was saying. But Cal didn't care. He wanted to get paid. "Hello? Master Huel? I'm here for the pickup," a voice called from inside. The color in Huel's face drained, and any semblance of his intoxication quickly replaced with a very real dread. "Shall I go introduce myself?" Cal pushed. Grumbling, Huel reached into the front pocket of his apron and shoved a handful of coins into Cal's hands. "Get out!" Huel growled, spinning on the spot and huffing his way to the front of the store. "Pleasure doing business with you, Master Huel," Cal said, grinning. Back from the wall, placed his shoddy tools inside, and made his way out the back and into the street. Cal's pack was nothing special to look at. Leif had given it to him once he started working for Huel. It was sturdy and deep enough to hold the few tools he owned, and whatever else Cal could think to bring for the day. The coin Huel had paid Cal wasn't much, and most of it would go to the orphanage. There were always mouths to feed, clothes to buy or repair, and books so Leif could continue his lessons. After all that, it left Cal with a coin or two to his name. But he didn't mind. He liked helping out at the orphanage. It was his home, as much as it was home to the Doolittles. His family had grown over the years. What was once only him, Ovette, Leif, and the Lady Havisham was now a menagerie of runaways and rascals. Chaotic at times, but Cal wouldn't have it any other way. The sun was starting to set, coating the red clay buildings in a golden sheen. The Littles would be getting ready for bed soon, but not before Ovette's story time. She was better with them than Cal was. She listened, had patience, used her words. But before Cal could return home, he had to settle the grumble in his stomach, since he knew full well that Lady Havisham would have conveniently forgotten to make enough stew for him. Typical. Bogdan's bar was in the same direction as the orphanage, and if Cal kept to the alleyways and used the back entrance, Bogdan shouldn't have any trouble serving him, especially not when Cal could pay this time. The Embers district of Igni really existed in its crisscrossing alleyways. It had a main thoroughway that connected the Stokes district gate to the smelt mine entrance at the bottom of the volcano. That throughway was always lined with stalls and stores, but Cal rarely took that path. Everyone knew everyone in the Embers. A tight-knit community of hardy miners and loyal citizens was the Daven slogan, a line repeated on the many fading posters that covered the building's clay walls. A community that Cal didn't want anything to do with. People here, people everywhere, were too happy to kiss the boots of the Davens and the prefects who enforced their laws. They'd happily sell out their neighbor for the mere chance of being rewarded. They'd traded freedom for convenience long ago, bought all the lies the Davens told them, and Cal hated them for it. So Cal kept to the back streets, avoiding the stares and judgment from the people of the Embers. They all knew who he was, what he was, and while most would simply turn their backs or shoo him away from their stalls, there were a few who delighted in tormenting the helpless. Not that Cal was helpless. He followed the alleyways, taking a familiar path to the back of Bogdan's bar, rapping on the back door as soon as he arrived. Hunger had a way of making him impatient. Well, more impatient. "Bogdan!" Cal called out, not wanting to wait around. The alleyways offered plenty of shadows to hide in, especially this late in the day. Great for someone trying to stay out of sight, but not so great for the mark they were trying to hide from. Cal was all too aware of the shadows around him, and he was paranoid that the clink of coin in his pack would attract the wrong kind of attention. "Bogdan! Come on! Open up!" Cal called out again. The back door swung open, And Bogdan, a man as tall and thick as a mountain, greeted Cal with a stare that bordered on aggression. I told you not to come back here without money, Bogdan said, his grimace accompanied by a hand the size of Cal's head stroking the side of his neck. Cal didn't bother to reply, not with words at least. He fished through his pack and drew out two of the coins Huel had just given him. He raised them up to Bogdan, who quickly snatched them out of his hands and slammed the door. Oi! Cal shouted. What are you doing? A few moments later, the back door swung open again, and Bogdan shoved a satchel into Cal's chest, the force pushing him back a few steps and knocking the wind out of him. You'll get no more, and you didn't get this from me. Now get before someone sees you, Bogdan said, slamming the door shut once more. Bootlicker, Cal called back. Bogdan didn't treat him any differently from the other citizens of Igni, and Cal knew he shouldn't let it get to him. He should follow Ovet's example and rise above it, as Lady Havisham constantly told him. But he couldn't help himself. He hated how they treated him and Ovet. It wasn't their fault they couldn't feel the gift. His hunger stronger than his anger, Cal tore open the satchel. His empty stomach sank as he looked down at more food than 2 coins worth. 2 loaves of bread, slices of cured meat, half a wheel of cheese, and a small flask of some liquid that Cal desperately hoped was Bogdan's famous, or infamous, ale. The burning fire in his chest ceased, as if his anger had been flushed from his system. He felt cold and stupid, but more than anything, he was hungry. Cal tucked into the food, eating just enough to feel full, or as close to full as he could while leaving enough for the others. He popped the cork off the flask and took a long swig. The honey-sweet ale washed over his tongue. He was tempted to drink it all right then and there. It had been too long since he'd tasted any, but he resisted. Cal wasn't the only fan of the ale in the orphanage. It would make a nice treat for Leif. Might even get Lady Havisham to leave him alone for a night, if he gave it to her. It was getting late, so Cal decided to walk through the main streets and back to the orphanage. It was quicker than the winding alleyways, and most people would have packed up for the night. He could make it back in time to give Leif the food and maybe listen in on either him or Ovet telling the littles a story. Raised voices ahead drew Cal's attention. The voices were familiar, as was the topic of the debate. Cal picked up his pace, heading in the direction of the shouting, already certain that he was going to hit someone, or get himself. Same as any other day. Cal rounded the street corner and was greeted by the sight of Roscoe, one of the older kids from the orphanage, on the ground. 3 others surrounded him, laughing and kicking dirt into his face. 2 of them were built similarly to Bogdan, with arms as thick as tree trunks, a not uncommon sight in a district of miners. The third was smaller, standing a few inches shorter than his counterparts, his posture no less threatening or arrogant. Cal knew the smaller lad well. Jord. Cal knew him very well. Jord was the son of some rich merchant from the Stokes district. He came from the kind of family that delighted in making money off the backs of other people, honest or otherwise. The kind of family that spawned righteous entitlement as often as children. It didn't matter to them. All they cared about was money and people who had money. Any that didn't were nothing more than tools or obstacles. Roscoe lay terrified on the floor, his hand outstretched, trying to halt whatever punishment Jord had decided Roscoe deserved. Maybe that'll teach you to talk back to your betters, hollow scum, Jord spat, kicking up more dirt at Roscoe. I'm not hollow, Roscoe cried back. His lip was bleeding, and his already dirty clothes were covered in a fresh layer of muck. Of course you are, Jord laughed. Everyone knows that old man only takes in the broken and discarded. That's not true, Roscoe said, trying his best to back away from his aggressors. Are you calling me a liar? George snapped. No, but I am calling you an asshole. Cal walked forward and positioned himself between Roscoe and Jord. Jord's face lit up, excited by the prospect of revenge against Cal. Oh, look who it is. King Hollow, Jord said, poking his finger into Cal's chest. What? Nothing to say? Jord continued. He'd stepped forward and was now inches from Cal. It would be so easy, too easy, to hit him square in the jaw. It wouldn't be the first time Cal had come to blows with Jord, but he didn't like the look of the two others Jord had brought with him. Figures that a coward like him would bring some muscle along. Get out of my face, Cal snarled, digging his fingers into his palm. Jord laughed out loud in response, turning to tap the back of his hand against the barreled chest of one of the mountains behind him. You hear that, Ding? King Hollow thinks he can give me orders. Me, Jord said. Yeah. Din grunted in a voice that told Cal everything he needed to know about his level of intelligence. How did Cal always end up in situations like these? It was clear from the clawing of Roscoe's hands at the back of his shirt and the scowls splayed across his opponent's faces that Cal wasn't getting out of this unscathed. Any attempt to de-escalate the situation was pointless. The back of Jord's palm began to glow, and a small runic symbol appeared, pulsing a mix of dull red and blue. Jord had taken to his gift well. For as long as Cal could remember, Jord had rubbed the fact that he was better than Cal in his face. Well dressed with slick-backed blonde hair, well fed with a healthy glow to his cheeks, and well liked for reasons that were beyond Cal. To Igni and everyone in it, Jord was everything Cal was not. If you get down on your knees and beg for forgiveness, then maybe I'll let you leave without setting those dirty rags you call clothes on fire, Jord said, his grin stretching across his oh-so-punchable face. Not happening. You've got no right being here, hollow-born scum, barked the other of Jord's oafs, taking a step forward. Cal had seen him around. Big, burly, and just as brainless. Careful, Testern, said Din. I hear them hollows can steal your gift if you let them touch you. Make you like one of them. Really? Even the little ones? I'm not Hollowborn, Roscoe cried from behind Cal, suddenly finding his voice. Are we going to do this or not? I have places I need to be, Cal said. He tried his best to sound calm and collected, but he could feel the twitches in his body, the nervous energy that gathered in his muscles before a fight. He loved that feeling. It made him feel alive. Cal hadn't started this situation, hadn't helped to calm it down, but he definitely hadn't started it. It had been a long and frustrating week, and George's symmetrical face was the perfect outlet for those frustrations. Hitting George wouldn't help out the orphanage in any way. It wouldn't bring Cal any closer to figuring out yet another way to screw with the Davins or the prefects. But it would feel good. It would feel really good. Besides, Jord and all the other giftlings like him relied too much on the gift. They used it for everything. Every simple little thing. It was up to someone like Cal to show them just how weak that reliance was. What's the matter, Jord? Not used to someone willing to fight back? Cal continued, balling his hands into fists and taking a step forward. Much to Cal's delight, Jord backed away, between Teston and Din. Your white-haired freak of a girlfriend won't be here to save you this time. What was her name again? Queen Hollow? Jord laughed. Teston, get this piece of smelt trash out of my sight. Teston held up his palm, his fingers limed with red gift, and released a burst of flame. Cal threw up his arms as the flames crashed into him. Weak as the flames were, they still singed something fierce, like open skin catching a plume of boiling steam. Cal stepped back, pushing Roscoe to the ground once again. He gritted his teeth against the pain. He would not give these bastards a satisfaction. The attack brought back much of George's previous bravado. He stepped out from behind Din, his shit-eating grin having returned. Father says your kind are a disease, a mistake, and that you need to be stamped out, George said, a particularly irksome vein bulging in his neck as his excitement grew. Why leave it up to the prefects? We are doing this city a service. Isn't that right, lads? Yeah, doing the city a service, Teston repeated, not taking his gaze off Cal. Beads of sweat ran down the side of Teston's face. It would be a few seconds before he could channel the gift again, but a few seconds was all Cal needed. Cal ducked low and bolted forward, that nervous energy propelling him like a coiled spring. Stamping one foot into the ground, he unhooked his pack and swung it high. Teston let out a sharp cry as the pack and the heavy tools contained within collided with his chin, sending him stumbling back into Jordan Din. Come on! Cal shouted as he spun. He grabbed Roscoe by the arm and began sprinting toward the nearest alleyway. What are you idiots doing? Jord yelled. Get off me! After him! Cal didn't have time to look back. He needed to create some distance between himself and Jord. Jord's pathetic display of power was enough to send Roscoe into a fit of panic, and even now, his sobbing wasn't making things easier. But Roscoe was smart enough to know what would happen if they were caught, and smart enough to know how to get away. You had to be smart living in the embers. The dull snap of wood above Cal told him all he needed to know about any onlookers they might have had. Even those who had been in the midst of hanging clothes out to dry ran inside, preferring to remain oblivious. No one wanted to come to the defense of a hollowborn. Not that it mattered. It wouldn't take Cal long to lose Jordan here. Wouldn't take him long to lose anyone, for that matter. He reckoned he knew these back alleys better than anyone else in the city. He felt more at home here than in most other places. He was a street rat, after all. It wasn't long before George's cries of anger at losing his prey were drowned out by the discord of the embers. Cal slowed his pace. It wouldn't be long before they were back at Leif's orphanage, so there was no need to rush. The buildings in this part of the embers mostly looked the same. Clay walls, runoff from the smelt mines that made excellent building materials, were roofed with whatever the residents could get their hands on. To the untrained, it was a never-ending maze of red. But to Cal, it was home. Even the prefects had started avoiding this part of the city. Something about the dregs that lived there not being worth their time. That suited Cal just fine. The fewer Dave and lapdogs he had to deal with, the better. Roscoe trudged alongside Cal, his sobs degraded to long, wet sniffs. I'm sorry, Cal. What for? I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to help out, like you do. Like I do? Roscoe dug into a shallow pocket and produced a handful of coin. Where did you get that? Cal asked, already knowing the answer. Found it, Roscoe murmured, his gaze locked on the ground. Uh-huh. And let me guess. Jordan, those two barely talking slabs of meat found you finding this, Cal said. He wasn't sure if he was impressed by the amount, for a first-timer, or disappointed that Roscoe had been stealing. So let me get this straight, Cal continued, coming to a halt. That little commotion that I just saved you from was actually your fault to begin with? Roscoe didn't reply, just wrung his hands in shame. This wasn't Cal's area of expertise when it came to the orphanage. Helping the littles grow into good people just wasn't a problem he was good at solving. He was far better at dealing with the George of the city. If there was a problem that could be hit, then Cal was your guy. But when it came to teaching someone right from wrong, where was Ovette when Cal needed her? Is this the first time? Cal asked, forcing his voice to be gentle and calm. Yes, Roscoe mumbled. Really? Roscoe didn't answer again. Well, your technique clearly needs work, and you really need to have some kind of escape plan if you're going to steal in broad daylight. Roscoe shifted slightly, scuffing the dirt with his boot. You could teach me to be like you. You do not want to be like me. Trust me, Cal said. Why not? Roscoe chimed back, his voice a little louder this time. Ovette says you're always looking out for us. She did? Yeah. She said you're always busy making sure no one bad comes to the orphanage, Roscoe said, now looking up at Cal, hopeful and maybe a little desperate. She said that if we're ever in trouble, then we should find you, that you'll always be there for us, because we're a family. Roscoe stared up at Cal with his big brown eyes. Innocent, untainted. Igny had written him off as just another child vagrant. He and all the kids like him meant nothing to the Davins. No parents, no hope, no purpose. Even those who had the gift weren't much use unless they showed aptitude for some kind of work. The only other option was to become the Gyfted, something Cal was certain Leif had just told the children to give them some kind of hope. Cal didn't have it in him to tell Roscoe that he was planning on leaving and planning on convincing Ovette to leave with him, too. Some of the littles wouldn't be so little soon. A few of them had even started showing signs of the gift. The orphanage didn't need two Hollowborn making things harder for them. So instead, Cal forced a smile and ruffled Roscoe's hair. Let's just get back home, okay? And I'll make you a deal. If you get back there before me, then I won't tell Lady Havisham about what you've been up to. Appeased, Roscoe raced off in the direction of the orphanage, all but forgetting the scuffle he'd just been involved in, and Cal followed behind, the conversation having left an ache in the back of his throat. Cal ushered Roscoe through the front door, the waft of Lady Havisham's stew greeting him. Roscoe skipped ahead, the trials of the day melting away at the promise of a full belly. The orphanage had changed little over the years, the only addition being the amount of people in it. The once empty space was now alive with activity, with littles running back and forth or cooped up together in the cubbyholes that dotted the room. Lady Havisham barking at someone had about something they did wrong. Leif's chesty chuckle echoing from his office-turned-school. It was noisy and messy, pure chaos at the best of times. It was home. Cal swallowed back the ache in his throat and made his way through the various piles of littles in his way. Some greeted him, others were deep into whatever imaginary game they were playing. Lady Havisham! Roscoe ran up to Lady Havisham and buried his face in her. She tried her best to shoo him away, but that only encouraged him to smush into her apron's dirty brown smudges even more. Be off with ye! You'll dirty yourself even more than you already is. Everybody loved Lady Havisham. And not just the orphans. Everyone. Cal couldn't recall a time when anyone had said a bad word about her. Anyone other than himself, that is. To him, she was bossy, motherly, overbearing, always telling folk what was right and what was wrong. She had an uncanny ability to insert herself into everyone's life, and on more than one occasion, Cal had been on the receiving end of one of her lectures. Still, She was part of the orphanage. Even Cal had to admit that the place wouldn't be the same without her. With an overemphasized grunt, she pried Roscoe off her and shooed him in the direction of the other kids playing nearby. Patting herself down, she regarded Cal with a look he was all too familiar with. Got yourself in more trouble, I take it. No more than usual. Cal wasn't in the mood for another lecture. Besides, Cal was already thinking of a plan to teach Jord a lesson, although plan might have been a strong word. Whatever elaborate scheme Cal thought he would just end up with him getting into a fistfight. It always did. You're supposed to be a role model for the little uns. You can't go around swinging your fists into every problem that comes your way. Yeah, well, you'll be pleased to hear that there was no actual fist swinging today. I sure there wasn't. Besides, I'm not fit to be anyone's role model. Missing that key ingredient, remember? She shook her head and turned back to her cooking. There's more to a person than their gift. Yeah, well, try telling the rest of the city that, Cal snapped. His voice had more venom than she probably deserved, but she had no idea what it was like. She'd lived with her gift for decades. Fit nicely into the Daven idea of a good little citizen. Whereas Cal was treated worse than someone's shit someone had stepped in. Look, I don't want to argue with you. Can you tell Leif I stopped by? Tell him yourself. She jerked her head in the direction of Leif's voice and returned her attention to her duties. Cal slammed down the meager coin Huel had given him earlier that day and left without another word. To call the space a living room was a bit of a stretch. Leif had set it up to resemble a classroom more than anything. And to be honest, to say Leif was teaching the kids anything was just as much of a stretch. Cal found Leif in the middle of animatedly regaling the kids with one of his many, many stories. They ranged from being about chivalrous heroes of old, defending the people from monstrous threats, to quick-witted thieves with hearts of gold. When Cal was younger, he'd imagined himself being a hero from one of his tales, riding into the embers on a flaming dower, freeing the people from whatever shadowy menace he could think of that day. But Cal had grown older since then. The realities of the world clearer to him now. The shadowy threats were real. He saw them every day. They had already won. The Davens had invaded Eudos hundreds of years ago. The books occupying every nook and cranny of this orphanage offered little in the way of explaining their arrival. Not like it really mattered. The Davens took whatever they wanted. Their technology was more advanced. Their culture was far more sophisticated, if you believed the orators who proffered promises of peace and wealth to all the good Eudans who accepted their lot in life. It was the Davens who spouted the bullshit about Hollowborns being a mistake. The Davens who instilled fear into the hearts of every giftling and child about not receiving their gift. No one was coming to save them. Eudos didn't deserve to be saved. Cal, are you listening to me? A tug from below snapped Cal back into the room. Leif had finished his tale, and the rest of the children had noticed his presence. Prissa clung to Cal's pants, the fabric bunched up in her tiny, frail hands. Leif says it's rude to ignore people. Sorry, Prissa. What did you say? Cal replied, pasting a smile on his face and willing his pulse back to a normal, less frantic rhythm. Leif said that great knight Irthus saved a village of Hollowborn people from a monster. What's an Hollowborn? It means exactly what it sounds like. You're born without the gift. You're hollow. I never seen you use the gift. Does that mean you're a Hollowborn? Prissa asked in innocence. Yeah, I am. Cal tried to keep his tone neutral and was grateful for the fact that Prissa was too young to understand the nuances of emotion. He reminded himself that there was nothing wrong with being curious. But I don't have the gift either. Does that mean I'm an all-born like you? No, you're not old enough to receive your gift yet. You'll have to wait a few more years yet. Roscoe is older, and he doesn't have a gift yet. What's with all the questions all of a sudden? And why are you so worried about who does and doesn't have the gift? You're years away from getting yours. How old are you again? 3? 4? I'm 9. With a huff, she stamped her foot and tugged harder on his pants. What? Cal replied, putting on his best playful tone. When did you get so big? Prissa turned away and crossed her arms, intent on continuing her huffiness. It was normal for the older kids to be worried about when they'd receive their gift. But Prissa shouldn't be thinking about stuff like that. Not yet. Trying to distract her was the best Cal could do for her. In 3 short years, she'd be under the scrutiny of every nosy, well-wishing neighbor. And the older she got without being able to channel anything, the less well-wishing those neighbors would become. Until eventually, she'd pass her 16th birthday, and any goodwill toward her would disappear. Every kid went through the same thing. The way you're treated for the rest of your life is basically decided by chance. The system was rotten. Cal wished someone would come along and do something about it. But until then, he'd just continue to do his best. Distract the littles with dumb playfulness. Because what else did someone like him have to offer? If Roscoe gets his gift, do you think he'll share it with me? I I don't want to be Hollowborn. Prissa turned back, her big brown eyes brimming with tears. It stung that even so young, she was afraid of being like Cal. She had every right to be afraid. She was young, not stupid. That's not how the gift works. Sorry, Priss, Cal said. He bent down, matching her eye level. Not that it mattered. Her gaze on him had broken, replaced by intense pouting and sniffing. Upsetting the littles again, are we, Cal? Leif said, limping over to join the conversation. His voice was always so soothing whenever Prissa and the rest of the littles were around. He'd spent years perfecting the art of injecting his voice with just the right amount of fatherliness and lecture. Funny how Cal only ever remembered the lecture part. Cal said, I can't share Roscoe's gift when he gets it. Leif winced as he knelt down. Cal couldn't remember a time when Leif didn't limp around, but in recent years, it was worse. Cal had lost count of how many times he'd asked him about it as a child, but Leif's answer had always been something different. Always some wild story about his younger days wandering Eudos. Eventually, Cal had just given up. Leif wrapped his arms around Prissa and pulled her in tight, and just like all the others, she melted in his arms, bearing her sobs and his ragged tunic. Come now, Prissa. You told me you were a big girl, huh? And big girls don't cry. Besides, you don't need Roscoe's gift. You'll get your own one day. But what if I don't? If Roscoe shares his with me, I won't have to be Hollowborn. Cal's right, Prissa. The gift can't be shared, Leif said. Leif was a father to everyone who lived here. The only one most had ever had. It dawned on Cal that he didn't know the reason why Leif ran the orphanage, why he took all these kids in. Not that he wasn't good at it, the opposite, in fact. But thinking back, Cal didn't think he'd asked him why he did what he did. His childhood had been full of questions about who his parents were and why the prefects were so interested in patrolling the area around the orphanage. The answer to both had always been the same. I don't know. Cal may not know why Leif ran the orphanage, but he did know one thing. Leif was a terrible liar. Leif stroked Prissa's hair as she continued to rub her face up against his chest. Besides, what's so wrong with being hollowborn? Cal's hollowborn, same as Ovette. But Ovette told me she wanted to share her gift with Cal. Through mumbles and hiccups, Cal almost missed what she said. Ovette was hollowborn, like him, the only person who really understood what it was like to be him. She didn't have a gift. She would have told him if she did. Pris, what do you mean Ovette wanted to share hers with me? She doesn't have a gift. Cal's mouth felt dry as he spoke. He felt breathless, like his heart had decided to stop for a second. Prissa was wrong. She had to be. Ovette would have said something. She would have. I saw her playing with it on the roof. A white light came from her hand and made the vegetables get bigger, she said, completely matter of fact, innocently unaware of how wrong it was for Ovette to keep this to herself. She saw me watching her. I thought she was going to be angry that I was out of bed, but she was smiling. The color drained from Leif's face. He broke out of his parental embrace and held Priss at arm's length, his wide eyes boring holes into the frail little girl. Cal knew why he felt annoyed, but why did Leif care? Wasn't he happy for Ovette? What color did you say her gift was, Prissa? Leif sputtered. His words were clipped, lacking that fatherly charm. White? You're sure? Yeah, I saw it. It was dark, so it was easy to see. Prissa's eyes darted from Leif's to Cal's, while Leif continued to stare intently into her, his fingers tight around her shoulders. She's. No. Leif muttered to himself. He'd let go of Prissa and begun to stand. You old fool. How did you not see this? The signs were there. Prissa took this as a sign of trouble and buried her face into Leif's leg. I'm sorry, Leif. I didn't mean to stay up past curfew. I heard a noise and I saw Ovette, and I followed her up to the roof and her words died out, her sobbing returning for round two. Leif snapped back to himself, quickly kneeling again to comfort Prissa. Hey. You didn't do anything wrong. But listen, I need to have a talk with Cal, okay? Can you run and ask Lady Havisham when supper will be ready? He held Prissa at arm's length again, his expression gentle and fatherly once more. Can you do that for me? Prissa murmured and nodded her head, as good a reply as Leif was going to get through all the sobbing. As she scampered off, Leif grabbed Cal by the shoulder and pushed him into the small space he used as an office. What are you doing? Leif? Cal sputtered. Cal, you need to listen to me, he said, locking the office door. If what Prissa just said is correct, Ovette is in trouble. What? Why? So she got her gift. Good for her, right? Cal didn't want to look at Leif, didn't want him to see how much this was getting to him. How could she keep this from him? Had she been lying to him all this time? Cal, you need to trust me. Ovette needs your help. You need to find her and bring her back here, Leif said, a pit opened in Cal's stomach as he stared at Leif. He'd never seen him like this before. Gone was the father. Gone was the lecturer. Instead, here stood an old man, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing an expression of panic. Leif, what's going on? Why are you so worried? The pit sank deeper. Cal, Ovette isn't just some giftling. She's the Gyfted. Ooh, what do you think that means, everyone? What does it mean to be the gifted? I guess we'll find out, won't we? As the story continues, how are you guys enjoying it so far? What do you think of this story? I am rather enjoying it so far. I think it's pretty good, and hopefully you guys are enjoying it as well. And if you're not, find a way to enjoy it. You know you like it. You know you want it. It's here for you. Oh, yeah. All right. If there are no comments, questions, concerns, anything else, we'll get ourselves started into the next chapter here momentarily. I need to fix one thing. I don't know why that is going off so fast. I have a little uh, stream deck that I use, and for some reason the screen kept on shutting down while I was in the middle of chapters. It would set up 15 minutes as a shut off, so not sure why it was doing that, but I just extended it. That should make it better. All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, if you guys are ready, we will jump into the next chapter. I believe I am ready. And if you are also ready, then we will be ready together. Together again. So, depending on how long the next chapter is, we'll see if we get two more chapters in tonight or just one. It could be two, it could be one. We'll find out after this next chapter. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Let's dive into two. Leif, slow down. You're not making any sense. Panic rose in Cal's chest as Leif tore through his office. He was searching for something, pulling drawers out of the desk and scattering their contents onto the floor. Cal had never seen him this animated, wild-eyed, frantic. It scared him. There's no way Oved is the gifted. Brissa probably just thought she saw a white light. Plus, what's the big deal if she is anyway? Cal's voice shook, his words lacking conviction. Leif just stared back at him, his pupils manic. Cal, I need you to listen. His words were quick, tumbled out, unfocused, as if translating thought into speech without pause. The gifted is real, very real, and very dangerous. The gifted. From the littles of the orphanage to rotten families of Igni, everyone had heard the stories. A giftling channeled the ambient gift in the air into their bodies, and from there they used that gift to perform arcane feats. According to the legends, the gifted didn't so much channel the gift, they became one with it. It flowed through them at all times, allowing them to perform the unthinkable. But that couldn't be Ovette. Cal refused to believe it. Ovette was just Ovette. If what Brissa says is true, Ovette is in grave danger. Leif continued ransacking his office, the already chaotic space descending into madness. What do you mean the gifted is real? I've never seen one. No one has. Cal tried to follow him around the space, but that soon proved to be pointless. What are you doing? Will you just slow down and explain things to me? Relief flashed across Leif's face as he pried a key from a hidden compartment in one of his drawers. He shoved Cal aside, unlocked the chest in the corner, and withdrew a battered sword. The hilt was covered in weathered scratches, the battles in which they'd been earned a distant memory. The blade, hewn of a material Cal didn't recognize, fared no better. It was worn and chipped along its edge, but despite the aged appearance, it emanated threat. Leif closed his eyes, centered himself with a breath, and pressed his forehead against the blade, hands gripping the pommel with one above the other. The Davins cannot find out what she is, where she is. But damn it! Leif dropped the blade to his side, his face twisting between panic and anger. They must already know. Of course they'd know. He threw open the final drawer of his desk and emptied its contents on the ground, tearing through the scattered papers until he found what looked like a map of Igni. Leif, going on? Why would the Davins want Ovette? That sinking pit in Cal's stomach yawned deeper. His palms grew hot, sweaty, and that familiar nervous energy flooded his veins. Does it have something to do with what Prissa thinks she saw? And what is this map you've got? Leif scanned the map, ran a finger along the streets between several annotated locations, some of which were circled, others crossed out. Cal, I don't have time to explain. I need you to find Ovette and bring her back here. If she's here, maybe I can cut a deal. Cut a deal for what? And with who? Come on! Leif barked as he unlocked the door to his office. Before leaving, he fixed Cal with a grim stare. Bring her back here, Cal. Whatever it takes. By the time Cal collected himself, Leif was gone. The makeshift classroom was now dominated by a long table where Roscoe, Prissa, and the other littles sat. A wooden bowl sat before them. They giggled and whispered to one another as Lady Havisham slopped meager stew portions into their bowls, while admonishing one or two of them for starting early. Her motherly expression soured when she noticed Cal. You're too old to be having any of it, and there's not enough to go around anyway. You need to scavenge someplace else. Cal swallowed the rising bile in his throat, the desire to bite back and put her in her place. Leif's words rang in his ears, and the only thing on his mind at that moment was Ovette. I don't want any. I'm looking for Ovette. Have you seen her? Ovette? Aye, I saw her leaving this morning, she replied, eyebrow cocked as she passed an accusatory eye over Cal, her cogs churning away, imagining what hollow-born mischief he was about to drag Ovette into. Did she say where she was going? I don't think should be telling you. Ovette's a good girl. Knows her place in this world, unlike some. Cal took a deep breath. Ovette mattered more than arguing. Leif asked me to go fetch her and bring her back here. Why can't he do it himself? He knows you're a bad influence on her. His fingers dug into his palms. Just one more comment. One more, and he knew he would lose it. Are you going to tell me or not? The words ground between his teeth. No, I'm not. Not till you tell me what Leif wants with her. Because he thinks she's the Gyfted. The words burst out of Cal's mouth before he could stop them. Lady Havisham's scorn dropped in an instant. Color drained from her face. Eyes wide, nostrils flared. Flames! No! She whispered, her hand raised to her mouth. Her reaction took Cal by surprise. It took a second, but her shock gave way to frantic energy, and she squeezed Cal's hands. She's in her spot, her little hideout. Go, quickly now, bring her back. The more she spoke, the more manic she looked. I will, Cal replied. He wanted so badly to ask what the hell was going on. For someone to just slow down and explain why Ovette being the Gyfted was such a bad thing. But her panic was infectious. It wormed its way through his limbs, slithered down his spine. Lady Havisham reached into the satchel hanging at her hip, pulled out a dagger, and thrust it into his hands, the blade nicking his palm. "Here, take it." What? Where did you get this?" "Leif gave it to me long ago. Can't be too careful in the embers. You should know that better than most." Her expression had shifted once more. The panicked ramble was replaced by a sternness. She looked more like the Lady Havisham Cal had come to loathe, but her scorn was absent. She almost looked like she trusted him. "Don't use it unless you have to, all right? Promise me." All Cal could do was nod in response. What the hell was going on? What had Ovette gotten herself into? What was Cal getting himself into? "Now go!" She ushered him out the door before he could say anything, ignoring the squeals and pleas from the other children. "Go!" Cal made his way through the embers, looking as inconspicuous as possible. Just another Hollowborn trying to remain invisible, and as long as he didn't cause trouble, it would stay that way. He couldn't wrap his head around the idea that Ovette could channel the gift, and from Leif and Lady Havisham's reactions, not just some fire flinging, something dangerous, something she should have told him about sooner. But in all the excitement, Cal hadn't stopped to consider how ridiculous this all was. Ovette was the same age as him. She couldn't have developed her gift now. It wasn't possible. Not unless this danger gift could only show itself later in a person's life. Did that mean Cal could still get his? Will his hand start spouting white light as well? And if not, why not? Why did she get to escape from being a Hollowborn and not him? What was he doing wrong? A crowd was starting to form in the district's market. At this time of day, hawkers were getting ready to close their shops and stalls, settling last bits of whatever they'd scrounged or cobbled together. Cal had always found it kind of pathetic, to be honest. Leif had told him that everyone got by in their own way, and that no one was happy with the Davins. But he didn't see that at all. Cal saw a bunch of cowards who'd rather gossip and whisper behind closed doors than actually push back. People who were content to listen and thank the Davins for their generosity while they pushed people like him out of their shops. The Davins spit on them, so they spit on him. An enormous wall separated the Embers district from the rest of Igni, a black iron buttress that ringed the district. It was built as yet another failsafe for the rest of the city. If the buildings and the lives that occupied them were not enough to staunch the rage that might one day spew from the volcano, then the wall would pick up the slack. Staring at it from ground level made Cal feel small, insignificant. But the view from the top, even Cal had to admit that it was breathtaking. Still, the wall paled in comparison to the giant chain in the sky. Still there, still ominous, still weird. A maintenance door at the foot of the wall stood bent out of shape, the result of a skirmish between a group of resisting Udins and the prefects. Cal remembered Leif's uncharacteristic anger when news broke out of their terrorist activities. Cal had told him that the Udins were in the right. They'd argued soon after. Words spat rather than spoken. Not even Lady Havisham had been able to calm him down. The very next day, Leif was gone, and the orphanage had felt different. The hustle of noise and scampering of little feet absent. It wasn't that unusual for Leif to leave for a day or two, off picking up a supply order or meeting with the orphanage's sole benefactor, someone Cal constantly told himself he would find out about, but never did. But something had felt off about his absence that time. Cal had convinced Ovette to help him search, and a few hours later they'd found themselves staring at this maintenance door. If someone wasn't actively searching for it, then the door would remain hidden well enough behind giant piles of slag and rubble, a common sight throughout most of the Embers, and which here served as a convenient barrier, obscuring the entrance. The door opened into a stairwell that had fared no better than the door itself. The metal handrail was warped and twisted, smooth to the touch. Dark red stains, crusted with time, splattered on the first few steps of the rusted iron flooring. It was obvious from the scoring on the walls what had happened here. Cal often fantasized about the rebels who had used this spot. To finally hear someone speak out against the Davins and their prefect lapdogs. Perhaps some of them had managed to escape and still wandered the embers in secret, waiting for their chance to strike again. The fantasy warmed him, at least for a moment. It made him feel supported, seen, though the feeling never lasted long. Chances are, whoever these rebels were, they weren't like Cal. They may have hated the Davins, but what use would someone like him be to them? Just some troublemaking kid with more temper than sense. Just another Hollowborn. Shaking off the thought, Cal took the stairs two at a time, his footfalls dull, muted echoes announcing his arrival. Now this place served Cal whenever he needed to get away from the staring, the jeering, or the hushed insults. Ovette never seemed to have the same problem, or she was just good at hiding it. She got the same hand-covered whispers as he did, but most folk treated her well enough. She had told him time and time again that all he needed to do was be patient with people, and that it wasn't their fault, that they didn't know any better, or that they were just trying to get by. Cal kind of understood what she meant. He saw how the guards could be just as cruel to them as they were to the Hollowborn, even going so far as openly offering rewards to anyone who snitched on a disobedient neighbor. But Ovette was too forgiving, and one day it was going to get her into trouble. One day like today. Cal cursed himself for not realizing she would be here sooner. Of course she would come here. Ovette always said she loved this spot because Cal loved this spot, whatever that meant. Before long, Cal had made his way to the top of the wall, stepping out to a stunning view of Igni and half expecting Ovette to be sitting there. From here, Cal could spot the market district, the Stokes. It was connected to the Embers via a short bridge that ran over the only open water source in the entire city. Ovette loved watching the people of the Stokes wander from stall to stall. She would try to guess where they came from, what lives they would return to. All Cal cared about were the goods they purchased. The shinier, the better. Further out was the prefect barracks. It didn't have an official district name, but most people had taken to calling it the Coal. It was a huge black building that dominated the smaller ones surrounding it. Cal always thought it looked ugly, with its slanted edges, sharp and precise, all function and no form. A group marched away from the barracks in military formation, 6 people walking side by side with another just ahead of them. From this distance, their patrol route was indecipherable. Too far away to get a good look, but it was no doubt deliberate. The Davins did nothing randomly. Pulling himself from the view, Cal made his way to a crumbled building that served as his and Ovette's secret spot. During many previous trips here, they had brought enough pillows and blankets to make what was left of the ruined tower comfortable. Items the orphanage could spare or was about to throw out. There were a few more lavish pillows than Cal had been able to pilfer without the knowledge or consent of their original owners. Pillows Ovette had initially refused to sit on. After a few days of pouting, he'd offered her the biggest, plushest cushion he'd acquired. It had been enough to bring her out of her silence, and it wasn't until later that he realized that he'd been played. The memory tugged his lips. The metal door to the tower stood before him, the faint scent of tea wafting through its many holes. It was pointless for him to stand here. She'd have heard him coming. But he couldn't move. Dryness tickled his throat. His palms grew slick with sweat. What was he going to say to her? As far as Ovette knew, Cal was oblivious to what was going on with her. Their last conversation escaped him. His mind was blank. He reached into the depths of his pea brain and found nothing. No thoughts, no hellos, no quips about how we're going to make it out of Igni one day soon. There was nothing. Uh, why are you just standing outside the door? Obet's voice was as soft and sweet as always. No matter what, Cal always found the sound soothing. No one disliked her to her face, though Cal saw their vanishing smiles as she turned away, and how they'd wipe down any surfaces she touched, and even the ones she didn't. Just thinking about it was enough to make his blood boil all over again. Behind their fake smiles, all they saw was another dirty little hollowborn. They, hello, Udos to Cal? Well, Cal was busy making himself angry all over again. Ovet had opened the door and was now staring at him in the face. What happened? Are you broken? Well, what? Uh, sorry. It's been a long day, Cal replied, rubbing the back of his neck and forcing a smirk. Really? She knew something was up, and she knew that Cal knew that she knew. It was impossible to hide anything from her, and his head hurt just thinking about it. Ovette pulled him over to a broken down section of the tower's wall. The view wasn't much different from the one outside, but it felt cozier here among their scavenged comforts. Or maybe just because she was here. Look, do you see? She said, pointing toward a tiny pinprick of a building in the distance. There's a new shop that's just opened up. Do you think they'll have any food or goods from outside Igni? Maybe something from the other chain cities. How can you even tell it's new from here? Cal replied. The small talk was absurd. He knew that, but he couldn't think of a way to broach the topic. Was he supposed to just come out and say it? I know every store in that district. Although I admit that's mainly because of you, she said, clearly baiting him into a trap. Me? Cal questioned, going along with it. What was the harm in pretending for just a few minutes? Mm-hmm. I've had to apologize to so many of the store owners in the Stokes. You know, because you're always getting kicked out. Helps me remember names and faces. Ovette couldn't help but chuckle and beam even wider as she talked. Cal had been the butt of her jibes for so many years now that he'd numbed to their sting. He endured her lame attempts at humor because it made her happy, made her smile. Playing this part further, he rolled his eyes and walked away from the window. Why are you interested in this new place anyway? He leaned against what passed as a table in this run-down gallery, pulling off as mischievous a grin as he could. You planning on stealing something? 'Cause you know that's my specialty, right? Oh, I know. She walked over to the table and took a small pouch out of a bag. Not stealing, buying. The pouch was old and patchy, the same one he'd made for her years ago, something she refused to throw out. It was embarrassing the way she'd held onto it all this time. You still have that? Cal grimaced. Please, let me make you a new one. Ovette clutched it to her chest, protecting it. I don't need a new one, thank you. But it's so old. I'm honestly surprised it's lasted this long. I could make you a better one. Nope. She smiled, fingers pressed into the childhood relic. I like this one just the way it is. Loosening the strings, she opened the pouch just enough for the few coins inside to glint in the light. The giftling ceremony is coming up in a few days, she said. I just thought we could treat some of the littles to something. You know, a nice big meal to celebrate their gift manifesting. That's quite the savings you got there. But why waste it on just one meal? Maybe we should spruce this place up a little. Cal gestured around the spot. Their spot. Few more throw pillows here, an actual chair over there. Replace the wall with a a wall. A little work, and we could really make something out of this place. She closed the coin pouch and just stared at it, gripping it so tight the coins clinked against one another. Just something before they leave. Leave? Cal said, trying his best to keep his tone neutral. Why would they leave? Couldn't they just stay with us? I mean, it's not like they have to tell anyone about their gift, right? She didn't respond. The moment hung heavy, silent, awkward. For what felt like forever, she just stood there, staring at the coin pouch, while Cal held his breath. You know, don't you? She uttered. About my. Yeah, no use in hiding it. Plain pretend had to end sooner or later. Prissa saw you. Cal was supposed to say something eloquent, something to set Ovette's mind at ease and make it all okay. They always made it okay for each other. But he couldn't rustle up the words. His lips pursed at the thought of Ovette using her gift. Heat rose in his cheeks. Leif wants you to come back to the orphanage, Cal said. Leif wants? Her voice cracked as she muttered the words. Yeah, he thinks you're in danger. Cal pushed off the table, crossing to the other side of the room, where a hole in the wall offered a partial view of the embers. He couldn't quite make out the orphanage from here, but he knew the district well enough to know where it was. Is that what you want, too? For me to come back? She didn't try to hide the pain in her voice, the disappointment. I. He turned his back to her, heard the ding of coins as she dropped the pouch on the table. Doesn't matter what I want, does it? Of course it does. How long? Cal uttered, tired all of a sudden, fed up. He just wanted this to be over, for things to go back the way they were. How long have you had it? A while. A few weeks, maybe, she whispered. I wanted to tell you. I really wanted to tell you, but. But you didn't. You kept it from me. The venom in his voice felt wrong, left a bad taste in his mouth. His fingers dug into the wall, crumbling loose, tiny flecks of stone. Hid your gift from me. I didn't know how to tell you. I know how you feel about giftlings, and I thought. You thought! He snapped, whirling to face her. Tears streaked her cheeks. Any other time, the sight would have been enough to quell his anger, but not today. Why would you even worry about what I thought? You got what you want. No more skulking around with a dirty hollowborn anymore. Cal, she uttered, her head dropping again. Tightness gripped his chest. His breath came in short rasps. He hated this so much. I'm sorry. Save it, he snapped. Why was she just taking this? Why wasn't she fighting back? Doesn't matter anyway. Leif doesn't think you're a giftling. He called you the Gyfted or something. The Gyfted? Yeah, like from the old stories, Cal said, willing the knot in his chest to loosen. Let's just head back. He can fill you in. Ovette lifted her head. Her expression shifted from sadness to something far worse, dread. The orphanage, she whimpered, her eyes widening. Yes, back to the orphanage. Like I've been saying. No, Cal, the orphanage. Ovette shoved Cal's shoulder, spinning him on the spot, forcing him to grip the wall for balance. He followed her gaze to the embers below. People fled through the streets, tumbling over one another. They ran in the opposite direction from where the orphanage would be, away from the flashes of light, away from the black plume of smoke rising over the district. Uh-oh. Sounds like being gifted is kind of bad, huh? Kind of bad. It may not be a good place to be. It could be bad. What do you guys think so far? Are they going to flee? Do they need to run? It is not good for them. What will happen to Leif, Miss Havisham, Lady Havisham, the Littles? I do not know. I suppose we will find out in our next reading here. What do you guys think? Are you ready to move along? Shall we go and listen into our next segment? I think we shall, because it sounds fun to me. Yes. Little drink. I'm rather enjoying this book so far. I hope you guys are too. Here we go. Let's dive ourselves into 3. Ovette in hand, Cal raced back toward the orphanage, barging through anyone who got in their way. Panic had filled the streets. Terrified citizens screamed and ran in the opposite direction, passing by in a blur. Ovette wrenched herself from Cal's grasp, panting. "What are you doing?" he snapped. "We can't stop. They need our help." "Cal," she said, her face red, fingers clutching her chest. "Is this my fault? Did I do this?" She struggled to get each word out, but the fear in her voice was plain to hear. "What are you talking about?" Cal said. "You've been here all morning. Roscoe probably finally got his gift and lost control." His lie tasted bitter. Leif, trapped by the fire, flashed in his mind, lancing an all-new kind of fear through him. The stubborn old man would be limping around, making sure the little ones weren't trying to pretend the fire away in some hidden corner of the building. "No, Cal!" Ovette snapped. She was close to the verge of tears. Looking at her made the knot in Cal's chest tighten. "They're here for me. I should just hand myself over to them. Maybe then they'll let everyone else go." "Are you listening to yourself?" Cal grabbed her shoulders. "For what possible reason could they want you?" He needed to see it. He needed proof. Ovette's glare intensified, her anguish shifting to anger. Good. He needed her to be angry. Tears and fear paralyzed you. Anger sets you free. She straightened. Standing before him wasn't the girl he'd grown up with. Wasn't the girl he'd tried to impress and keep at a distance all at once. White flame erupted in her palm without effort, dancing between her fingers. Cal stared at it, transfixed. Her gift was real, different from the ones he'd seen before. For most, their hands would glow a similar color to their gift. Some of the older orphans had said channeling wasn't easy. The Daven brands made the process easier, less exhausting. But Ovette showed no signs of discomfort, or exhaustion. If anything, for a heartbeat, Cal could swear she looked relieved as she stared at him. "I wanted to tell you. I really did," she said, the intensity in her gaze unwavering. "But I didn't know how. Not because I thought you'd be angry. I knew you'd be angry. I didn't tell you because I don't know what this is. Cal," she continued, "I've had a vision. Or something." "A vision? What do you mean?" Cal said. Ovette closed her palm, snuffing out whatever light was there. Cal couldn't take his eyes off her hand. He just stared, though not half as intensely as Ovette had. He felt empty, small all of a sudden. "I don't know. It was more like an impression, like something's watching me," she said, stepping a little closer. "It scared me, Cal. I don't want to be seen." She placed a hand on Cal's shoulder, and warmth drifted through his body. It shook him out of his stupor, reignited his panic. "We need to get back. Leif will know what to do. He has to," Cal said. Ovette nodded in response, removing her hand and clutching it around something under her clothing. A longing for the now absent warmth crept into his thoughts, but he shook it away. He needed to focus. He needed to get back and do something. Anything. "Can you run?" he asked. "Yes. Don't worry about me. I won't fall behind," she replied, sounding resolved. He grabbed her hand again and darted into the alleyways. They would offer a quicker route, avoiding the mass of people trying to flee whatever was going on at the orphanage. Ovette kept pace as Cal ran through the narrow alley, his heart thundering with each footfall. Leif was going to be okay. Leif had to be okay. Leif, please be okay. The orphanage blazed like a pyre. Flames filled every window and burst through doorways and holes. The smoke-filled air made breathing difficult. Cal heaved. His eyes stung from the heat, but he refused to tear them away from the inferno in front of him. Everything he had ever known was burning. He had to get in there. Maybe there was still time. He moved, but was pulled to the ground before he could make the first step. He glared at Ovette. "What are you doing?" Ovette pointed at the prefects hurling fire at untouched sections of the orphanage, while others dragged out screaming littles and threw them to the ground. Each wore simple, inexpensive plate armor. Crude, but enough to make little men feel big. Cal's fingers found the hilt of the dagger Lady Havisham had given him. The prefects weren't looking his way. He could take one of them hostage, force them to back down. Ovette could hide here, safe. They'd never know she was here. He could do this. He had to do this. Ovette buried her face into his shoulder, halting his adrenaline. "Cal, our home. The Littles." "I know," he said, trying his best to sound brave. "Ovette, I need you to stay here and hide, okay? I'll—" "Ah!" A shriek from inside the orphanage cut him off, tearing his attention away from Ovette. A prefect hauled out Lady Havisham and threw her amongst the rest of the children. Her face was a model of black and purple, and she clutched her side, blood seeping through her dirty apron. She dragged herself toward the terrified Littles, shielding them as two black armored figures emerged from the burning building. A golden spire with chains wrapped around it emblazoned on both their breastplates. One bore a menacing helmet, while the other's shock of white hair stood in stark contrast to his armor. Flames glimmered against his blackened plate, its sharp, angular ridges, almost wing-like, running from gauntlets to elbows. Cal was transfixed by their presence. I shall ask you one more time, Lady Havisham. The white-haired man's voice was devoid of pity, a compliment to his granite-like expression. Where is the gifted? Ovette gasped. She had been right. This soldier, this murderer, had come for her. He was the one in charge, the one who led the prefects as they set fire to Cal's life. Cal tried in vain to bring his breathing under control. His knuckles whitened around the hilt of the dagger. Let me go. Roscoe kicked and squirmed as a prefect dragged him out of the building. Soot smeared his face, and sweat sheened his brow. Behind him, another prefect dragged a mewling Prissa out by the hair. With every step, she withdrew into herself, flinched at every sound. The first threw Roscoe to the ground and sent his boot into the boy's stomach for good measure. Roscoe yelped in pain, but managed to latch onto the prefect's foot, not letting it get away. The corners of Cal's vision blurred, his skin flushed with heat. That same nervous energy pooled in his muscles. He tried to move forward, but Ovette held him tight. She tilted her head, opening one eye to allow herself the barest glimpse of the unfolding brutality. Stupid little hollowborn! The prefect bellowed. He yanked his foot from Roscoe's grasp and brought the heel down onto the boy's face with a wet crunch. Cal looked away, flinching at the noise. Roscoe cradled his bloodied and broken nose, the blood streaming through his fingers. He flung his other palm out to the prefect. His screaming broke his voice. The strain shook his body. Ha! The prefect looked toward the others, menacing glee painted across his face in broad strokes. Lads, come look at this! Little Smelter thinks he's a hero! Roscoe, unperturbed by the prefect's comments, strained harder. The sweat from his forehead mixed with the blood from his smashed nose. The back of his hand began to glow, dim at first. He pushed, strained. The prefect looked down just as fire erupted from Roscoe's palm, a whipping, flailing gout of flame. The prefect reeled, screaming in pain, his hands clawing at the right side of his face. My eye! You little hollow-touched! He roared. In an instant, his sword was in his hand, and in the next, Cal watched in horror as the prefect ran Roscoe through, gritting his teeth as he pushed harder on the hilt. He drove the blade deeper, and Roscoe made no sound as he slumped to the ground, save for a wet, blood-spluttering cough. The prefect, boot to chest, yanked his blade free. Cal couldn't breathe, couldn't do anything. His vision watered as he stared into Roscoe's lifeless eyes. The only movement came from Ovette's muted sobbing and the grasping of her hands. These dirty little hollow scum! We should just kill the lot of them! The prefect snarled. He swung his sword through the air in a clumsy arc, flicking Roscoe's blood across the ground. The children whimpered even more, while Lady Havisham stared at Roscoe's corpse. It's your own fault. The white-haired man had turned toward the burned prefect. His tone was still flat, as if uninterested in the events that were unfolding before him. You let a child get the better of you. Your injury should serve as a reminder of your vigilance, or lack thereof. Even a cornered rat can bare its teeth when pushed. The disgust on his face made it clear he didn't care. None of them did. To them, the littles were no better than the filth that gets thrown out into the streets. Ovette had stopped sobbing, stopped clawing at Cal's clothing. She stared at the ground, silent. No murmur, no mutter. This was worse. Cal couldn't take this much longer. There must be something he could do. Cause a distraction, maybe? Set fire to a different building and make them investigate that instead. Each idea, half formed and reckless, passed by in a blur. The man in charge, the one with the white hair, he was the solution. If Cal could get to him and plunge this dagger into his neck, he would save everyone. His breath quickened at the thought, the nervous energy pleading to be used, burning through his leaden legs. The white-haired man turned on his heel to face the other prefects. It's clear we're getting nowhere here. Take the children. His gaze shifted to Lady Havisham. If they resist, kill them. Roscoe's killer turned to take hold of Prissa, passing his sword to his other hand. Prissa broke free from his grasp and dove toward Roscoe's body. The prefect pulled and tugged at her hair, but Prissa's grip was iron. Want to join your friend, do you? He barked. His confidence and bravado were high, well in front of opponents too afraid to fight back. Fine! His sword looked clumsy in his offhand, held at an odd angle. Still, he raised the tip above his shoulders and swung down hard. Cal's scream died in his throat. The veins in his neck bulged. The blade cut deep, but not into Prissa. Lady Havisham had thrown herself over Prissa. Cal hadn't seen her move. One moment she was at the feet of the men in black, and in the next, Cal moved before thinking. He screamed, bellowed with all the anger and rage he could muster, as he tore through the square toward the burned prefect. The prefect turned just in time to see Cal, just in time for their eyes to lock and for Cal to register the man's fear. Cal drove the dagger into the prefect's throat, the momentum tumbling them both to the ground. The prefect gargled, one hand grasping at his neck, the other pushing against his assailant. But Cal held firm, forgetting the world around him. Warm blood spilled across Cal's fingers as the panic left the prefect's eyes. He watched as the prefect's life slipped away, listened as he rasped his last. Pain exploded at the base of his skull. He sprawled forward, then looked back to see his reflection in a faceless black helmet. Brave, but foolish nonetheless. The white-haired commander stood a few paces away, arms crossed, observing the scene. Cal shook his head against the blur and pain that had replaced his vision. In front of him was not a man. It was a monster that Cal had to take down in order to protect his family. He could do this. His opponent may be armored, but Cal's anger made him feel strong, invincible. He slashed with his dagger, wild swings that connected with nothing but air. His armored opponent dodged with little effort. Grief strangled his cries as he lunged. Why not use your gift, boy? The white-haired commander taunted. Fighting like this will get you nowhere. Cal continued in earnest, trying, hoping, praying that he would land a strike. His limbs grew heavy, his steps clumsy, and yet his opponent moved as if his armor weighed nothing. Ah, I see. A hollowborn protecting the gifted. How novel. Shut up! Cal screamed. You've a fire in you, boy, but this charade has come to its end. Dispose of him. With terrifying speed, the armored man stepped to the side, grabbed hold of Cal's wrist mid-thrust. Cal struggled and pulled, but it was useless. The gauntlet closed around the hilt of the dagger, crushing his fingers. Cal yowled in pain. He yanked his shattered hand free as the dagger fell from his clumsy grip. The armored man caught it mid-fall. He flipped it blade over hilt and then plunged the tip into Cal's stomach. Cal staggered back. It took his brain a few seconds to register what had happened, and a few seconds more to register the intense pain that pierced through his body. It felt as though every nerve ending in his stomach was on fire. His legs hollowed, and he crumbled to his knees. Your kind need to learn their place. The white-haired commander raised his sword. You're little more than a stain on the Empire. Pathetic. A waste of gift. Cal couldn't take his eyes off the hilt in his stomach. His trembling fingers pawed at it. Pain lanced through him with each involuntary shudder. I hereby find you guilty of murdering a prefect in cold blood. Mirth had crept its way into the man's voice. And charge you for being hollow-born. The punishment for these crimes is death. Cal's anger had drained. He felt empty. He could do nothing but watch as the sword was raised high, slow and steady. Staying awake grew more difficult with each breath. No! Stop! Ovette screamed as she ran. She flung her arms out and placed herself between Cal and the commander. What's this? Another Hollowborn? My, Hephaestus. Quite the rabble you've collected. Cal felt the impulse to move his arm, to push her out of the way. I'm the one you want. I'm the Gyfted. Her voice was desperate and angry. I'll go with you, but only if you let him live. Let them all live. No. Cal struggled to speak. Blood had begun to pool in his throat. The commander took a heavy step forward, blade tip pointed at Ovette. Prove your claim. White gift fire bloomed in Ovette's palm. Its glow cast eerie shadows in the commander's armor, the material absorbing the light. Very well. Take her. Leave them. Ovette spun around and knelt beside Cal. The light from her palm slid into his chest as she cradled his head. I'm sorry, she whispered, kissing his cheek and slipping something into his pocket. I'm so sorry. No. Darkness crept across Cal's vision. His last sight was Ovette being pulled into the smoke by the armored man. He fought to stay awake, but his strength, his anger, failed. The warmth in his chest faded with his consciousness. Well, guys, we're 2 hours in, and I think we've got at least one more chapter to go tonight. We had one really long chapter and then a couple of short chapters after that. I'm okay with that. Let's do it. Let's get 5 chapters in tonight, shall we? Sounds good? We'll get the prelude, prologue, preface, started with a P, and then chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sounds good to me. This story has got me gripping and moving along, so now many of you who have been with me before know I don't normally read these until I'm reading them with you because I like to experience them with you guys. I'm gripped at the moment. Let's find out what happens. When we start into 4, Cal pushed, gritting his teeth against the effort. His fingers, slick with blood, twisted around the dagger's cracking leather grip. His head swam with images of bodies lying in pools of blood, their final thoughts frozen in lifeless eyes, their panic, their fear. They were locked onto him, accusing him. It was his fault. He squeezed his eyes shut, willed the pain away, pushed it down, down to where he didn't have to look at it anymore, down to where he didn't have to feel it anymore. But guilt clung to him like pitch. When he opened his eyes again, he saw the dagger buried in his stomach, his reward. It was all his fault. He should have gotten there sooner. Cal jolted awake, gasping as the last vestiges of the nightmare faded. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. His insides groaned in protest. His fingers traced the edge of a bandage covering his stomach, specks of blood forming beneath. Be careful, or you'll reopen that wound. A woman with shoulder-length raven black hair pushed him back down onto the bed. Her hands were rough, calloused. She was around the same age as him, perhaps a year or two older. Cal was mesmerized by the sight of her. Her posture radiated danger, as if she were fresh from a fight or ready to jump into the next. Leif, he's awake! Finally! She yelled to her side. Her voice carried confidence that bordered on arrogance, the cocksure attitude of someone engaging with a task they deemed beneath them. Leif limped into the room a few seconds later. He wore faded leather armor that looked awkward hanging off his old bones. Something about it just didn't fit right, like it was made for a younger man. He placed his sword on the desk, the nicked edge glinting in the dim light, deadly even at rest. He threw his arms around Cal and held tight, squeezing too hard, the scent of the old leather encumbering them both. My boy, you're awake. His voice cracked as he let Cal go. I thought I'd lost you too. His tired hands gripped Cal's shoulders. His bloodshot eyes searched Cal's face. Cal couldn't say anything. He didn't know where to begin. For a fleeting moment, seeing Leif unharmed lightened the load in his chest, allowed a brief pause of relief. Then the memories crashed back, bringing with them another wave of grief that cut deeper than any flesh wound. Roskell, Lady Havisham, their bodies lying motionless in the dirt, Prissa wailing next to them. The memory hit Cal hard. He shoved Leif away, ignoring the tearing he felt in his gut. Where were you? He said, pain layering his voice. You should have been there. Where were you? Leif said nothing. He just stared at Cal. The dark circles under his eyes deepened. Cal searched his face for an answer. Any answer. But there was none. This old man had failed, and he knew it. It was the only thing that showed in his gaze. Answer me! Cal yelled, his voice breaking. He needed Leif to know that this was his fault, to feel this guilt, the weight of this responsibility. Cal, you have every right to feel angry, but don't tell me how I feel, old man, Cal spat. Just tell me why you abandoned us like a coward. He was looking for me. The raven-haired woman answered. She'd propped herself up against the wall, or at least what was left of it. Cal hadn't noticed it until now, but he was lying in Leif's ruined office. The walls were scorched black, and the smell of burnt oil and wood was thick in the air, making Cal's eyes water even more. Leif thought something like this would happen after the Gyfted used her new abilities, but even he couldn't have predicted how fast the Lord Inquisitor would arrive. Cal glared at her. Why was she more important than protecting this orphanage? What did she have to do with Leif and Ovette anyway? You should be grateful, she said, sounding almost bored as she examined her nails. If we hadn't arrived when we did, then you'd likely be dead. Just like the... That's enough, Shay. Leif murmured. His voice carried the weight of his exhaustion. He sounded old, defeated. Shay replied with a huff. She pushed herself off the wall and left through what remained of the entrance to Leif's office. What's going on, Leif? Who is she? And why was getting her more important than staying here? Cal, there's more going on here than you realize. Ovette was dangerous. I went to Shay to see if her people would take her. Take Ovette? What do you mean she's dangerous? Ovette wouldn't harm a dung fly. Heat grew in Cal as he listened to each word Leif said. How could he say those things about Ovette? Who did he think he was? I know, Cal. I know, Leif replied. Talking was clearly draining him of whatever energy he had, but Cal didn't care. He moved over to the desk and sagged into his chair, the wood creaking as if it were about to break. Ovette's gift isn't like the others. It's far more potent. Think of all the varieties of the gift there are. Destruction, perception, force. Giftlings have the ability to channel and manipulate one of these. But even a giftling must practice this ability. And without the brand, channeling gift can be deadly. Yeah, I remember your lessons, Cal spat. Leif had warned about the dangers of being a giftling, that it wasn't an easy way out. Those born with a natural affinity for channeling were often drafted into the military, made prefects or worse, doomed to a life of servitude. But that's not what Cal saw. The prefects Cal had seen looked all too pleased with their new lot in life. They bullied those who couldn't fight back just as much as the Davins. You still haven't told me what this has to do with Ovette's gift. Impatience bled into his voice. He wasn't in the mood for another lecture. I'm getting to that. Gift is the foundation of life in Eudos. Each type is a building block for everything we can see, touch, or taste. It surrounds us, knits together the fabric that holds the realms together. The gifted is able to not just manipulate and channel the gift, but also become one with it. They can shape the gift into whatever they please. Untrained, that power is pure chaos. But a trained gifted would have enough power to punch a hole through the veil that separates the realms. The gift holds the realms together? There's more than one? Yes, Cal. Eudos isn't the only realm out there. Why do you think there are Eudens and Davins? Where did you think the Davins came from? The Davins aren't from our realm? Cal couldn't believe what he was hearing. He'd never stopped to think about why they were called Davins. He just knew he hated the word. Hated them. No. They're from a realm called Davos, and they want Eudos's gift. And the gifted? Yes. Gifted like Ovette are rare. Very rare. But when they appear, the Davins will stop at nothing to capture them. Leif hung his head as he finished. There it was, Cal thought, his guilt. So he did know. Pitiful old man. And you just let it happen. They came to our home, butchered our family, and you just let it happen. Cal, even if I was here, he replied, talking more to the floor than to Cal. There was nothing I could have done. You could have died instead of them, Cal barked, the words erupting from his mouth before he could stop them. A wave of dizziness and nausea overwhelmed him. His anger meant the words, but his heart didn't mean the cruelty. Still, he bit his lip and turned away from Leif. not ready to take the words back. The moment dragged, long, silent, and heavy, unbearable until Leif pushed himself from his chair and made to leave, but not before whispering, "I wish I had." "I'm going to get her back," Cal said, his declaration coming out strangled but no less certain. "I don't care what it takes. I'll get her back." Leif paused, his shoulders sagging further. He took a deep breath and turned to face Cal once more, his eyes swollen from tears begging for release. "No, Cal, it's too late." Before Cal could respond, Leif left his office. Cal wanted to go after him, but he was too tired, just now realizing how shallow his breathing had become. He felt the heat drain from his skin and his adrenaline fade as he sat staring at the door. His stomach surged with pain. He placed his hand over the bandage, trying in vain to quell the deep throb in his muscles, blood coating his fingers as he pressed down. With effort, he settled himself back into the bed, his eyes feeling heavy. Cal stared through a jagged hole in the ceiling, the wood cracked and flaking in the cool evening breeze. The sky looked peaceful, so quiet. The usual hustle and bustle of the nearby streets was absent. The area surrounding the orphanage must still be deserted. Igni's chain loomed overhead, its runic symbols glowing orange hot against the darkening sky. Cal couldn't see the great spire that the chain, and the others like it, was connected to, but he knew it was there. The chain's glow shifted and pulsed, the heart of the volcano still very much alive. He watched it for a while, allowing fatigue to creep through his limbs, welcomed it, in fact, before it took him. He turned his gaze to the sword Leif had left on the desk. He'd never seen a sword like it before. It didn't look all that different from the ones he'd made, but there was something more to it. Maybe it was just his imagination, but Cal swore he could feel something when he stared at it, like it wanted to be seen, yearned to be held, to be used. He was too tired to ponder the idea of a sword wanting to be used, and, before long, sleep took him. Cal woke to sunlight glaring at him through the hole in the ceiling. He raised his hand to shield his eyes, turning his head in the process. Shay leaned over a wooden basin, washing blood off her hands with a roll of bloodied bandages crumpled next to her. Cal brushed his fingers against the fresh set on his stomach, feeling along the neatly fastened edges. "Thanks," he grumbled. He meant to show more thanks, but the word caught in his throat. "Thank Leif," Shay replied, not looking up. Instead, she continued to wash the blood, his blood, from her hands. "He did most of the work. I just helped." "Right," Cal muttered, laying his head back into the pillow. His limbs were heavy, too heavy to lift. Each breath felt like a chore. His mind circled back to Ovette again and again, unable to think of anything else. Shay dried her hands on a cloth and wandered over to the sword that was now hanging on the only real wall left in the room. "There's more to that old coot than meets the eye, huh?" she continued, speaking more to herself than to Cal. "And where do you suppose he got this from?" "How should I know? It's just a sword. Probably bought it in the Stokes," Cal replied. His head throbbed, and he was in no mood to be playing mind games with someone he didn't know. Something about the way Shay held herself told him that he wasn't going to get the peace and quiet he wanted. But then again, she had saved his life. He figured she at least deserved to be indulged for a while. She lifted the sword from its perch, her arms drooping from its weight. "Huh, heavier than I expected." She tested the edge of the blade, swishing it through the air in clumsy sweeps before resting the flat of it on her palm. Her fingers followed along the nicks and cracks in the blade as she tutted to herself. What a waste. The sword didn't look right in her hand. She held the hilt at an awkward angle, her wrist bent up too much, compensating for its apparent weight. Cal got the sense that longer blades were not her style. What's so special about it? Cal asked. Her finger stopped mid-scan, and she let out an exaggerated sigh. You really don't know anything, do you? Her tone dripped condescension. She kept her eyes on the nick in the blade that her finger rested on. Whatever, Cal said. I'm too tired to play games. He tried to move, tried to do anything other than lie there, but his body refused to obey. Suit yourself. She pursed her lips, replaced the sword back on its perch, and made for the doorway. Pausing at its ruined frame, she tilted her head back. I know where she is, where they're keeping her. What? Leif won't do anything, but I'm guessing you want to. I can take you to where they're keeping her. Her tone changed. Her demeanor shifted. Now she was all business, matter of fact. You'd help me? Cal replied. Why? Who are you? She took a moment, breathing in before she answered. Sorry, personal details ain't part of the deal. But if you want my help, come find me before I leave town. I'll be at your secret little hideout. What? How do you? Cal started, not sure how to broach the question. We've had our eye on you for a while, Cal, she smirked, confident and cocksure all over again. We? She turned and continued to back out of the door. See you soon, handsome. Her smirk widened as she left. Half-baked ideas of storming some villainous castle with Shay's mysterious allies at his back flashed through Cal's mind. How many people did Shay have with her? Dozens? Hundreds? Was she part of the rebellion? He felt giddy just thinking about it. The wound in his stomach still pained him, but the giddiness brought on by Shay's offer was enough for him to ignore it somewhat. As he calmed, it dawned on him that he hadn't eaten a thing since waking up. Or at least, he didn't remember eating anything. With care, he swung his legs over the edge of the bed and tested his weight. His feet felt heavy and wooden, but the cold stone floor of Leif's office was refreshing after laying under what passed for a blanket for so long. He still wore the same dirty clothes from the other day, his tunic ruined with dark red stains framing either side of the torn cloth. First things first, he'd need fresh clothing, or at least as fresh as the orphanage could offer. Hobbling over to the doorway, he braced his hand against the wall for support. The wood flaked and crumbled into dust. The destruction made this all real. His home had been destroyed. The memory of the fire was still fresh in his mind, the heat from the flames too easy to recall. Memories at Leif's burnt-out office did little to quell. Cal, you're awake! Prissa darted over and buried her face in Cal's stomach. He doubled over from the pain, more so as she squeezed him close. Leaning her head back to look up, her expression was caught somewhere between smiling and crying. Her face a mess of tears and snot. I was so worried. I didn't know how to help. Leif said you were sick and that I wasn't allowed to see you and that nice Shay woman was going to take care of you and that if I wanted to be a good girl, I needed to let you sleep. But you slept for so long, and I. Her babbling ended with a burst of tears and another painful jolt as she buried her head into his abdomen again. Cal, Roscoe, and Lady Havisham, they're not. Her body jerked through each breathy sob. Sobs she'd clearly been holding in for days. Her crying caught the attention of the other surviving littles, and they all ran over, each recounting how Leif had told them to leave Cal alone while he slept, while he recovered. Unaware of their grief, their suffering. Hey, it's okay. I'm awake now, and I'm fine, see? Cal puffed out his chest, placing his arms on either side of his waist. He ignored the strain in his side. The littles needed it, needed something, and he didn't know what else to give. He tried to make himself look as strong and heroic as he could, though his performance did little to comfort Prissa or dissuade the others from sobbing. Prissa noticed the bandage on his stomach and the fresh pool of blood that had started to seep through. I'm sorry, Cal. You got hurt because of me. Prissa sniffed, backing away, her gaze fixed on the blood. Cal dropped to his knee, suppressing a wince and keeping a smile on his face. This pff, doesn't even hurt, he said, grinning. She sniffed again, muttering inaudible butts before wiping her face on the sleeve of her tattered, mud-caked dress. This wasn't your fault, Pris. None of this was. But I hid, and he tried to get me, tried to take me away. Roscoe, he hit him, and then he. She broke down again, and Cal wrapped his arms around her, bringing her in close. Shh, it's okay. It's okay. Leigh, Leigh says I have to say goodbye today to Roscoe and Lady Havisham. Her hiccuping sobs replaced her snivels, shaking her small frame. Say goodbye? What do you mean? Cal asked, already afraid of what her answer might be. Leigh says they need to go on their final journey, and we have to help them. He's outside now, building. Prissa's gaze wandered to one of the few remaining windows. Outside, visible through the soot-stained glass, Leif was stacking small logs on top of one another, crisscrossing the rows. A funeral pyre. What's Leif building, Cal? Prissa asked. Her voice was distant, and now that she'd seen it, she couldn't take her eyes off the stacks of wood. She was too young to understand what they were, what it meant for your body to be burned away by fire. The finality of an old Igni tradition, one most didn't practice anymore. The expectation was to take Lady Havisham and Roskell to the Citadel, but Leif had chosen to commit their bodies to gift fire. He looked solemn as he worked. He'd removed his faded leathers, looking more like the Leif that Cal was used to. Except that wasn't who he was. Not anymore. He strained against the weight of each log, patches of his shirt clinging to his skin. Cal's fingers twitched. Part of him wanted to help, to go out and let the silence of the work be his apology for what he'd said. Cal clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened, and he turned away from the sight of Leif. Pris, I need to get changed. Did any of my things survive the fire? He said, tone flat. Uh, yeah, she stuttered. His sudden change in demeanor took her by surprise. That new lady put your stuff in your room. Most of it is still there. As Cal started off in the direction of his room, Prissa wrapped her hands around his wrist. I don't know how to say goodbye, she squeaked, tears once again brimming in her already swollen red eyes. Nor do I, Pris, he whispered, before pulling back. It pained him to walk away from her, but he had to meet Shay. He needed to feel like he was moving. Staying here, saying goodbye? He couldn't. Not yet. He didn't deserve to. Cal's room lay half destroyed. The fire had crept along the foot of his bed, and judging from the singed sheets, he was surprised to see that it was still standing. He had no intention, however, of testing the stability of the bed's crumbling legs. A set of clean clothes, cleaner than any he'd ever owned, lay folded beside an old leather jerkin, similar to the one Leif had worn, but smaller, more his size. A note lay on top. Just in case you need it. The handwriting was sloppy, but had a certain femininity to it. Cal's mind jumped to the notes he and Ovette would leave each other in their secret spot. Ovette's purchases and his fines for the day. He smiled at the memory, but his heart sank as he set the note aside and picked up a small bundle of dirty cloth. It was heavier than he expected, and he knew what the bundle contained the moment he touched it. Lady Havisham's dagger. The dagger had been cleaned and coated in oil. Cal closed his fingers around the hilt. The leather wrappings were soft and supple with the same oily substance. It felt more at home in his hand, like it fit him, like it wasn't Lady Havisham's dagger. It was his. The face of the prefect he'd killed flashed through his mind, the fear in the prefect's eyes as he realized his time had come. Cal's legs shook at the thought. He needed to sit down. Nausea hit him like a punch to the gut, and his stomach responded with throbbing waves of pain. The dagger clattered to the floor as his hands moved to cover his face, and he slumped onto the bed, gasping for air. Everything felt tight. His chest, his arms, his hands that he'd balled into fists over his eyes. He gasped for air, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't take in enough. The lack of oxygen added to his dizziness. The spasms in his stomach made him thankful that he hadn't eaten anything. Cal couldn't get the image of the prefect out of his head. He didn't know which was worse, that he'd taken his life, or how easy it had been. He moved his sweaty hands from his face and rubbed them against his pants. Something was heaped next to the dagger, poking out from the bundle of cloth. Patchwork material that looked older, worn down. Ovette's coin pouch. He remembered her slipping something into his pocket before she was taken. His breathing eased as he pictured her staring at this ratty old thing, thumbing the patchwork and refusing his offers to make her a new one. All the tension he felt streamed down his face, tears wet and unstoppable. He felt as though a weight had been lifted off his chest. He looked at the dagger again, swallowed hard, and picked it back up off the floor. Calming himself, he wiped away the tears and threw on the fresh set of clothing. The leather jerkin had a smell that was difficult to ignore, but it fit him well enough. He turned back toward the door and was surprised to see Prissa standing there. "Priss, I—" "Leif wants to see you," she mumbled, scuffing the floorboard with her shoe. "He's in his office." She raised her eyes to peek at Cal, eyeing the dagger he'd attached to his belt, before rushing off back down the stairs. Cal took one last deep breath and made his way after her. Leif sat behind his desk, eyes fixed on his sword hanging on the wall. He didn't react to the creaking floorboards as Cal entered. Didn't turn his gaze when Cal took the seat opposite him. For a while, the silence stretched between them, Cal watching Leif while the old man studied his sword. Shay's words echoed as Cal considered Leif's mysterious past. He never talked about his life before the orphanage, but Cal knew he hadn't been born in Igni, and that he'd left his old life behind when he'd taken over the orphanage. Cal's scowl deepened until Leif turned his head to meet his gaze. Age and fatigue dragged on Leif's skin and darkened the rings under his eyes. This seemed like it was a new permanent look for him. No more warmth and laughter lines. Just one more thing that had changed. "I know you're angry with me, Cal," he said, his voice hollow like he was going through the motions, ramping up to something. "And believe me, I wish I had been here. I wish it had been me who was taken, or was—" He stopped, and Cal was glad he did. Cal didn't need reminding of what he'd said to him. He wasn't ready to apologize or say he didn't mean it, but he also didn't need to hear it again. "What's done is done," Leif continued, avoiding eye contact. "We need to start thinking about rebuilding this place. Make sure the Littles still have somewhere to call home. We need to start moving on. Cal didn't answer, just continued to stare. He knew what Leif was going to ask. To stay, to take over his role, and look after whoever was left, to abandon Ovette. I can't do that alone, Cal. I'm too old, too tired. I need you here with me. They need you here, he said, gesturing with his chin toward the rest of the orphanage. Cal swallowed hard, his throat tight. Heat rose in him again. What about Ovette? He asked, trying his best not to sound bitter. But the bile in his throat told him he was failing. Should we just move on? Forget about her? That's not what I mean. You know that. Then what do you mean? Cal said. Cal felt like he was walking right into Leif's trap, but he refused to back down. Tell me, how should we move on from Ovette being taken? From Lady Havisham and Roscoe being slaughtered like animals in front of us? I'm trying to keep us together, Cal, Leif muttered, rubbing his temples. He was growing more frustrated by the second. The mask of the patient father was slipping ever so slightly. Good. Cal wanted it to slip, wanted him to shout. He needed the justification for calling him a coward. Now is not the time to run off and get yourself killed. Oh, so now you care if one of us dies? Of course I care, he yelled, slamming a fist onto the table. His voice rang out through what was left of the building. Cal knew because any noise the Littles were making in the other room went silent. Funny way of showing it, Cal muttered. He was surprised and a little disappointed that he didn't feel an overwhelming urge to bite back, to rise to meet Leif's outburst with his own. The redness in Leif's face receded. He shook his head, the movement near imperceptible, and staggered to his feet. We're holding the pyre tonight. Saying goodbye, he said, his voice devoid of his previous aggression, returned instead to the tired old man he'd become. They need you to be there. Ovette needs me more, Cal replied, lifting his gaze to the sword on the wall. Leif stood and hobbled out of his office. Cal waited, motionless, for the desire to chase after him and say sorry to die in his chest. Sorry wasn't going to fix anything. Not wanting to waste another second, Cal stood, hauled Leif's sword off its perch, and climbed through the broken wall that led out into the street. Sorry wasn't going to get Ovette back. All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and call it there this evening. Hey, Drew stopped by. Author of the book here. I can't stay long as I'm right in the middle of writing the follow-up book, but I just wanted to extend my heartfelt thanks to Tim and his community. Yay. Glad that he had the opportunity to stop by. All right, everyone. Well, thank you for joining me this evening for our initial reading of Gyfted. I will be back again Saturday with more. Hope you guys will come along to join us. The chapters, of course, that were recorded will be available on the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@SirArminius. I'm going to start posting them immediately following the stream. Thank you so much for being here with me tonight. It means a lot to me and to the community, and I know to the authors that you are here and supporting their books. Remember, if you have Kindle Unlimited, go pick up this book. You can read along with me, read ahead if you need to. Buy the book on Amazon. Whatever, make sure that we are supporting our indie author community. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening, and I will see you guys again, hopefully, later this week. Have a great night, all.